Hey guys, welcome back. I hope you are having an amazing day. Let's get right into the stories. The first one is an entitled People story. My family has owned a small farm for over 50 years now. It started with my great-grandfather buying the land and slowly building it up over time. He worked incredibly hard to turn what was essentially a patch of dirt into a prosperous farm that could provide for his family. That work ethic and dedication was passed down through each generation. When my father retired last year, he handed over the responsibility of running the farm to me. It was a huge honor, but also a major responsibility. This was my family's legacy that was now in my hands. I aim to continue the hard work and make my great-grandfather proud. The farm mainly produced crops like corn, hay, and soybeans. We also raised some livestock like chickens, pigs, and cows. It was just the right size for me to handle on my own with occasional help from hired hands during busy seasons. I loved getting to work the land, nurture the animals, and reap the rewards of a good harvest. The farm was my happy place. That is, until my two cousins came into the picture. Mark and Luke were my dad's sister sons. We were never super close growing up since they lived in a different state. I would see them once a year at family reunions. Even then, they mostly kept to themselves. Frankly, I never gave them much thought. That changed when they showed up at my doorstep one Saturday morning. I was just finishing breakfast when I heard a knock at the door. I opened it to find Mark and Luke standing there with suitcases. Before I could even ask why they were here, Mark barged in and said, "Good, you're finally up. Help us take our bags to our rooms." I stood there, stunned. "Wait, what? What are you guys doing here?" Luke scoffed. "We're moving in, obviously. This farm is as much ours as it is yours." Now I was really confused. "What on earth are you talking about? This farm belongs to me. It was handed down to me by my father." Mark rolled his eyes. "Yeah, we know. But your dad was our uncle, so by blood, we have a right to it too. Now are you going to show us our rooms or not?" I couldn't believe what I was hearing. They show up unannounced and just expect to move into my family's farm? I stood firm and said, "Absolutely not. This farm was entrusted to me and me alone by my father. You have no claim over it." Luke frowned. "You can't keep us from our birthright. We demand you give us our fair share." Mark chimed in. "Yeah, we talked it over and decided the only fair thing is to split it. You take the house and barn, we'll take the fields and livestock." I shook my head in disbelief. "I'm not giving you anything. This farm is not yours to take. Please leave now before I call the police." Mark got right in my face. "Oh, you're gonna regret threatening us like that. We're gonna be back tonight while you're sleeping. Then we'll show you who really owns this place." Luke shoved me hard as they stormed out. I quickly locked the door behind them. My hands were shaking. I couldn't believe my own cousins would threaten me like that. I spent the rest of the day securing the house and barn. I barricaded doors and windows. I made sure all the animals were locked up safely in the barn. Then I sat up all night with my shotgun, waiting to defend my property. Sure enough, a few hours after midnight, I heard noises outside. I peeked out the window to see Mark and Luke lurking around with flashlights. They were testing doors and windows, looking for a way in. I swung open the front door and aimed my shotgun right at them. "Get off my land now! I already called the sheriff and he's on his way." That must have scared them because they went running off into the darkness. I did actually call the sheriff right after they left that morning. I told him what happened and that I feared they may come back to try and steal from me. The sheriff agreed to drive by a few times during the night to check on the place. He also said to call him immediately if they showed up again. I ended up staying awake keeping watch for 3 nights in a row. There was no sign of Mark or Luke, but I wasn't taking any chances. On the 4th day, I decided I needed to take legal action to protect myself and the farm. I met with a lawyer and told him the whole story. He said I had a very solid case against them. Because the farm was willed solely to me, they had no legal claim whatsoever. He helped me file a restraining order that would keep them away. We also filed a notice with the county registrar affirming that I was the sole legal owner of the farm. This created an official record to prevent future claims against the property. The lawyer wrote a strongly worded cease and desist letter to Mark and Luke. He indicated that I would press charges if they trespassed or attempted to lay claim to the farm again. Weeks went by without any word from them. I hoped this meant they finally got the message loud and clear, that this farm was not theirs for the taking. One night I got a call from the county sheriff's office. Mark and Luke had been arrested. Apparently, they caught them trying to scheme their way into obtaining a farm one county over that was willed to another cousin. A friend of the cousin got suspicious and notified the sheriff. When they arrested Mark and Luke, they found evidence of plans to take over several family farms in the area. It seemed this was a regular strategy of theirs. Thanks to the legal action I took, the sheriff already had them flagged in the system. When he saw my name listed on their target farms, he gave me a call. It felt like such a relief to know they were finally caught. The sheriff said with their long list of priors, they would likely be locked up for years. These days, the farm is back to being my peaceful, happy place. I can work without constantly watching over my shoulder, all thanks to my smart decision to take legal action swiftly. I realized you can't give entitled people like Mark and Luke an inch. You need to stand up for yourself and protect what is rightfully yours. I was able to defend this farm and secure its legacy for future generations. My great-grandfather would be proud. The next one is a pro-revenge story. I divorced my ex-wife over 5 years ago due to her repeatedly cheating on me with over 13 different men and 2 women. To provide some background, my ex and I were swingers until the last year of our marriage. Things spiraled out of control, so I decided I was done swapping partners. Unfortunately, she didn't agree with me and continued to secretly meet with other men. 6 months before our divorce, my oldest child was diagnosed with a life-threatening illness. I won't go into details to maintain my privacy. Under the pressure, she began to drink excessively, endangering herself and our children. It became so severe that I moved out of the house for a few weeks, taking our children with me. During this period, her best friend, whom I'll refer to as Amy, approached me. My ex had confided in Amy about her actions during a girls' night out. She revealed that she had been seeing a new man every night and drinking heavily, even when she was responsible for the children. She even admitted to leaving our 3-year-old and 4-year-old children alone at home one night to meet a man. Amy also shared that my ex intended to file for divorce after extracting more money from me while living in my house without paying rent. Both Amy and I were appalled and realized that this situation couldn't continue. My ex despised living with me because she felt restricted from seeing other men. We needed a strategy to evict her from the house and gather evidence of her misconduct to limit her access to the children. I returned home and confronted her, which led to a heated argument. Unbeknownst to her, I recorded our conversation. When she threatened to call the police, I stood my ground. She reported me for domestic violence. The police arrived promptly and detained me. However, after I shared the recording with a detective, the tables turned and she was arrested instead. She stayed with Amy for a week since she couldn't return to our home due to a restraining order I obtained. During this time, she spent lavishly, depleting our joint bank account and even tapping into my savings. Amy informed me that she was also drinking heavily at her place. Amy recorded her behavior, providing me with footage of her in a severely intoxicated state. To protect my finances, I withdrew our savings, opened a new account, and closed our joint accounts and credit cards. When she discovered she had no more funds to squander, she confided in Amy about contemplating suicide. Despite our differences, I didn't want any harm to come to her. Amy persuaded her to seek help, and she checked into a mental health facility. This not only ensured she received the care she needed, but also highlighted her instability. I then consulted an attorney to initiate divorce proceedings. My lawyer was shocked by my ex's actions and supported my bid for primary custody. We served her the divorce papers while she was in the hospital and scheduled an initial hearing. At the hearing, she portrayed herself as a victim, accusing me of abuse. However, when my attorney presented our evidence, including Amy's testimony, her lies unraveled. In the end, I was granted sole custody, while she received supervised visitation pending her completion of rehab and therapy. We reached an out-of-court agreement, which included a structured visitation plan contingent on her attending rehab and counseling sessions. I retained the house after compensating her for some of the equity, and maintained control of my investment accounts. I now spend the majority of the time with my children. She moved in with her mother and has been hopping between jobs. 5 years later, life is much better, especially without her constant chaos. The next one is a petty revenge story. So this isn't really a massive revenge, but it takes place at my great-grandmother's funeral, Vera. It's one of my fondest memories. All the names in this story will be fictitious. This story takes place in 2016. My great-aunt Karen is absolutely terrible. She boasts about how stingy she is. She paid for her daughter's wedding, and the altar was on wheels. and constantly tries to belittle others. She was always terrible to Vera when she was alive. When Vera passed away, the sequence of events was rapid. She died at 8, the house was cleared out by 9, it was on the market by 10, and the first viewing was scheduled for 11:30. At Vera's funeral, which Karen planned, she refused to let my mother sing. This was strange because she wanted my cousin, her grandson, to do a reading. On the day of the funeral, he expressed that he didn't want to read, and everyone accepted it. Then came the revenge. My family members are all trained singers, including Granddad, Mom, Dad, Bro, and me. During the hymns, we sang softly out of respect for everyone present. However, Karen decided to try and sing louder than us. We could all hear her off-key wailing. We exchanged glances and gradually began to increase our volume. At first, Karen didn't notice, but as she did, she tried to sing even louder. We were ready for this exact situation. We knew all the hymns, including the harmonies and descants. Suddenly, we sang out at full volume in a 4-part harmony. She looked at us in shock and continued trying to outsing us. She was no match for 3 classically trained singers and 2 former church choir boys. Needless to say, it was an entertaining funeral. The next one is a malicious compliance story. For background, my jobs have always been geared towards data entry because that's what I excel at. I've consistently typed over 120 words per minute and have a passion for discovering new keyboard shortcuts to enhance efficiency. This skill has always made me stand out in roles that required it, except for my current position. I've been with this company for nearly 3 months. Like many data entry positions, there's a weekly productivity target. By the second week, I was meeting this target as I became familiar with the role. This motivated me to become even faster. I mastered the software tools I needed, employed keyboard shortcuts to switch between applications, close them, and utilized Excel formulas like concatenate and VLOOKUP to automate repetitive tasks that others typically did manually. In essence, I always find ways to save time. Yesterday, we received the team's productivity report, and I noticed that I had achieved 3 times the expected output for a single employee in a week. My performance had reached unprecedented levels. However, instead of receiving commendation, I felt this company is not keen on praising since I joined, or inquiries about my methods. I got an email from the management expressing that my figures were concerning. They implied they were launching an investigation to determine if I had manipulated the numbers. They even sent me a comparison of my performance with others, highlighting that it was improbable for me to have such a significant lead over colleagues who had been there for years. My figures were in the 800s, while the next highest was 300 for the week. Today, my supervisor informed me that she had spent the day reviewing my work. Everything was accurate. This investigation wasn't her initiative, she was merely verifying my work upon request. She confirmed that everything was in order and gave me the green light to continue my current approach. I quickly realized that this company doesn't value commendation. There's no motivation to exceed expectations if one's efforts are only met with skepticism. While I understand a company's need to verify unusually high performance, especially from a new employee, the preemptive conclusion that my numbers were concerning and impossible without first checking my work is where I take issue. There was no need to inform me of this scrutiny. Once they verified the accuracy of my work, there was complete silence. No apology, no acknowledgement, no inquiry about my methods to potentially benefit the team. Using my basic Excel skills, I created a spreadsheet to track my tasks. It alerts me once I achieve the weekly target, allowing me to halt without exceeding it. I've added a slight buffer to ensure I don't fall below the required productivity, avoiding any potential disciplinary action. But it's just slightly above the bare minimum. If they choose to see me as a minimum effort employee, that's precisely what they'll get. The next one is an entitled people story. Years ago, my dad met Harold through mutual friends, and they hit it off. I was 18 and in college when I met him, and we never had a close relationship. However, he always seemed to think of himself as a family friend and was extremely infantilizing and condescending towards me. Every time I saw him, I'd try to tell myself it wasn't that bad, only for him to prove me wrong less than a minute later. Harold would disrespect my boundaries, say things like, "You're not 19, you're a baby," while I was talking to other people, and patronize me and my education or my hobbies whenever he had the chance. He always noticed that it annoyed me, to which he'd playfully ask if I hated him. I always said no, but only for my father's sake. The final straw came the day Harold interrupted a barbecue to say, "I really like you, even though you're an impolite brat." I was 20 years old. I'd been quiet all day, working on a paper during the barbecue, but replied patiently and politely whenever anyone addressed me. And even if that hadn't been the case, I knew he didn't have the right to talk to me like that. After that, I started making an effort to avoid any events I knew he'd be attending. Yesterday was my father's girlfriend's birthday. They threw a small lunch party at my dad's apartment. I went there with my fiancé and our 6-month-old son. Harold was there. I hadn't seen him in months, but he still talked to me as if I was a dumb child. Never mind that I'm engaged, a mother, and 26 years old. I spent the whole party ignoring his helpful advice about me being too young to get married or be a mom. It helped that most of the other guests seemed to disagree with him. My baby spent most of the afternoon sleeping. There's a bassinet in my old room. He woke up hungry, so I went to breastfeed him and excused myself from the party for a while. I returned to jokes and comments, all from Harold, about how I was probably struggling if my son had managed to keep me away for so long. He went on to interrupt a conversation I was having with another of my dad's friends to question pretty much everything about my parenting. He doesn't even have custody of his daughter, by the way, and to make more comments about my age. I decided I couldn't take it anymore after he asked if I'd thought about giving my baby up for adoption. I got my son and told my fiancé we were leaving. We said goodbye to everyone except Harold. When we got to the door, Harold came to ask why we were leaving. I tried to make up an excuse, but he kept trying to make us stay. After a small back and forth, he jokingly asked if I hated him, and this time I said, "Yes, I do. Can we go now?" He didn't say anything, and we left. On the way home, my fiancé said he was proud of me. My father called this morning to say the opposite, and we had a small fight, but ultimately decided to drop the subject. I'm sure this isn't over, but if it keeps going, it won't be because of me. This is far from my proudest moment, and a small part of me regrets it, but I'm done with that guy. The next one is an entitled parent's story. I'm a 27-year-old woman, and I have a black horse named Ebony. The color is important for later. I keep her at a boarding stable where I used to take riding lessons before getting my own horse. For some reason, horses tend to attract entitled people. This wasn't my first encounter with them at this stable. Here are the cast members. Me, entitled mom, whom I'll refer to as Barn Witch, entitled daughter, whom I'll refer to as Barn Goblin, and my old trainer who still works there. I had my horse tied up in a section where there's room to groom them and tack them up. I was brushing her down when Barn Goblin showed up, wanting to pet Ebony. I told her not to pet her since I didn't know this child, and it's not a good idea to approach unfamiliar horses due to the risk of being kicked. Horses can be lethal if they kick. Barn Goblin cried out, "Mommy, she won't let me pet the black horse." That's when Barn Witch appeared, saying with annoyance, "Lady, I have a child and she wants to pet your horse." "No, it's not a good idea to pet unfamiliar horses. They can be skittish," I responded. "Barn Goblin wants yours, though. She only likes black horses, and the trainer only let her ride a white one," Barn Witch retorted. "I'm sorry, but this isn't his horse, it's mine. The horse the trainer brought out is better with new people. Others aren't," I replied, trying to remain calm. Suddenly, we heard Barn Goblin scream. Her hand was bleeding because she tried petting my old trainer's new horse. She was the only other black horse there, and this horse didn't like strangers, resulting in Barn Goblin getting bitten quite severely. My old trainer came out to see what had happened. He's someone you wouldn't want to cross. After I explained the situation, my old trainer scolded them, telling them to leave and find another place to ride. Not only did the child get bitten for not listening, but she was also yanking on and using spurs on his other horse, which wasn't allowed. I couldn't help but smirk when Barn Witch and Goblin were escorted out, never to return. I apologize if this isn't my best story, but I wanted to share it. The next one is an entitled parent story. A few years ago, I lived in a house that was a block away from a public park. It was a very large park, and I noticed 2 soccer games occurring when I left one Saturday to go to the grocery store. When I returned home about 45 minutes later, I noticed there was a truck parked beside my property. The occupants of that truck were on my property. There were 2 children dressed in soccer uniforms, their mom and dad, and a large Doberman. The Doberman was lying on a picnic blanket, the parents were setting up their family's picnic lunch, and the children were chasing each other, all on my front lawn. I couldn't believe my eyes. I pulled my car into my driveway and walked over to the family, asking them why they were on my property. The entitled mother then retorted, "What does it look like? We are eating lunch." I asked why they weren't eating in the public park that was a block away, and she responded, "It's more peaceful here." In complete shock, I then said, "This is private property, and you all need to leave now." The mother's response was, "Go F yourself, you little bee." I was furious. I pay the mortgage, I do all the lawn work, and you think it's okay to trespass and tell me where to go on my own property? So this was the easiest revenge ever. I walked right beside them to the outside tap that was attached to my sprinkler system and turned it on. The family started screaming and grabbed all their stuff as they ran to their truck. The mother and father shouted obscenities the whole time and said that they were going to get me. Well, this is where revenge number 2 came in. I downloaded my security camera footage which showed their license plate and brought it to my next-door neighbor, who just happened to be a police officer working that day. The parents were charged with trespassing, and I had a smile on my face for the rest of the day. Thank you for watching. I would really appreciate it if you could like the video and subscribe to our channel if you haven't already. We'll see you again tomorrow.